Welcome back to HHSTV coverage of the Democratic National Convention. Today I'll be sitting down with Bernie Sanders platform appointee Lisa Kermish from California. Lisa graduated from the University of California, Berkeley, and would later spend 30-plus years working there. Today she is a union representative. What follows is my interview with her. I'm here with Bernie Sanders delegate, Lisa Kermish from California. Ms. Kermish, thank you for joining me today.
Sure, my pleasure.
First, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in politics?
Sure. And I should start off by saying I'm not a Bernie Sanders delegate. I'm a Bernie Sanders appointee to the platform committee. So there's somewhat of a difference, meaning I don't get to vote. But I did get to vote on the platform committee. How did I get involved in politics? I was born to it. I am the granddaughter of a longshoreman from San Francisco and an immigrant from what's now Poland. And we always had progressive politics in my background. My dad was a social worker. My grandmother was a fascinating woman, and she ran the ladies' auxiliary for the Longshore Hall in San Francisco. And I grew up thinking that this was what everybody did. You joined a union, and you voted whoever was the most progressive person or issue on the ballot. In fact, my father once told me that when you woke up the next morning and found out who had won, and you realized that the person that you'd voted for had lost, that's how you know that you voted correctly. So that's what I was born to.
So then have you ever been a delegate or on the platform committee before?
No, I never have, and I've never wanted to. I've voted in every election, whether municipal or national, since I was eligible to vote, because it's a right, and I tell people that it's easy for rights to be taken away if you're not using them. So use your rights. There's literally never been a candidate that excited me so much as Bernie Sanders, because he, and I should say, Barack Obama came close, but I was worried about his sort of establishment ties. I didn't worry about that with Bernie. And sort of everywhere, or virtually everywhere, that Bernie professed an opinion, I remarkably agreed with it. And I thought, well, dagnabbit, then let's do something about this. So that's how I decided to get involved.
Did you join the Barack Obama campaign? Did you support the campaign?
I supported the campaign, but only monetarily for Barack Obama. For Bernie, boy, I hate this phrase, but I'll say I really do hate this phrase, but I put boots on the ground. So.
You were saying how Bernie Sanders is essentially this new kind of campaign you're seeing. Has this happened with any of the other Democratic candidates? For example, has Hillary Clinton also done enough to earn your vote, assuming she's the nominee?
Oh boy, that's actually a complicated question with many components to it. I don't think that she has so much earned my vote as the fact that she's going to get my vote by default. And I've said that I'm tired of having to vote for the lesser of two evils. Unfortunately, this election is such a situation where the worse of the two evils is so diabolical that the prospect that he who shall not be named is elected president is too terrifying, and I need to do what I can to stop that from happening.
So for Hillary Clinton, your thoughts are just, she's the lesser of two evils, she's not the best we could get.
Sure. I think that Bernie is a candidate whose opinions I agree with much more, and who I think has very little downside. I think Hillary has considerable downsides. Her ties to corporate America, her waffling opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, her willingness to look at foreign relations as considering military options more quickly than one might. And I think, frankly, she lacks the perspective of looking at problems in America and beyond as being class issues. I think Bernie is much more articulate in pointing to, he's raised the issue of income inequality. That's a phrase that would not be part of this campaign season were it not for Bernie Sanders raising the issue of there's the uber rich and then there's everybody else, and we need to focus on everybody else and make the uber rich pay their fair share.
As for the issues now, what do you think is the most important issue that people from California face?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it ties back to the income inequality issues, but it's more complicated than that, or it takes in more aspects. I think that California, like many states, has seen a massive growth in the incarceration of young people, and particularly young people of color. And that has to do with inherent racism, and it has to do with outdated, ridiculous drug laws. I'm actually very proud that one of the planks in the Democratic platform that the Bernie Sanders people pushed and that actually won was removing marijuana from the list of Class A drugs, which, by the way, is in the same level as heroin, and means that people who have PTSD, for veterans who have PTSD and for whom medical marijuana has been prescribed cannot receive it because it's on the federal list of banned drugs. So removing that, I'm sort of getting a little bit far afield here, but I'll try and pull it back in. Removing that from the list of Schedule A drugs will do, among many other things, it will stop or at least circumvent the direct pipeline of young people to prison rather than young people to college, which in my mind, it's a no-brainer that there's many more opportunities when you send kids to college. But it's not only about opportunity, it's about budget priorities. Here's my perspective. I spent my career working at the University of California. I spent 32 years there as an administrator for a social science research unit, which was closed during the recession in early 2010. And what has happened is that there's so much money going into the prison system that the amount of money available for, say, public higher education, the state of California now provides less than 7% of the operating budget for the University of California. That's just crazy. It means that they're dependent on outside funds, that drug companies and other corporations then begin to drive the direction of research. And it just means that people sort of are going to college for what I think are some of the wrong reasons, which is get a good high-paying job. I actually think college should be an opportunity, and I hope you take advantage of this, when you get to just sort of screw around and take all kinds of interesting classes just because they interest you. You're never going to have that opportunity again. You may find your passion. You may find the things that you detest. And it has to do with giving kids, young people, the opportunity to learn and to love learning. For me, that's what college should be about. And it has to do, again, with shifting priorities. Don't focus on a prison economy. Focus on an education economy. We like to say an economy that works for all, that lifts everybody up. So.
Now, as for the larger scale, do you think that that's also the most important issue that Americans in general face?
I think the issue of income inequality, it's the big umbrella that encompasses everything.
How does the Democratic Party adopt a platform?
Well, this is a whole process that I knew absolutely nothing about, and I still don't pretend to be an expert on it. But my involvement has been that there is, and again, there are sort of these Byzantine rules, some of which I think are written down and some of which are just sort of passed on like folklore or something. But each, in this case, each campaign, both the Hillary campaign and the Bernie campaign, were able to appoint or nominate people to be on the drafting committee. And then the DNC also appointed people. And there was some sort of horse trading about who they would and would not allow. But so there was this committee of sort of the elite committee, the drafting committee, which I think was somewhere around 15 people, that met in St. Louis maybe a month or so ago now. And they came up with the draft of the platform. And then that draft platform was disseminated to the larger committee, which again consisted of people appointed by the two campaigns and by the DNC. And that's a large committee. Sort of the idea, they always say you should never try and draft things by committee. Well, this was a committee of 187 people, I believe. So as you can imagine, it was somewhat controlled chaos. So we had this draft platform, and then individual members of the larger committee could submit proposed amendments to that. And each of the two campaigns attempted to sort of corral the proposed amendments from their delegates so that you didn't have 15 on the same item with slightly different wording. So there was some of that sort of compilation of the proposed amendments, but when we arrived in Orlando a few weeks ago, there were 237 amendments that had been proposed. And then it was sort of off to the races of seeing which could be combined, which would be withdrawn. It was also very clear, we knew going into the larger platform committee that there were many more Hillary appointees than there were Bernie appointees, and then you add to the Hillary list the DNC appointments, because the vast majority of those were going to be siding with the Hillary camp. So it was pretty clear that if there was not a relative unanimity of opinion, that we were going to lose individual votes, which we did for the most part, although I have to say the marijuana vote that I referenced earlier was a clear surprise win for the Bernie camp. We were all sort of, what? We won that? I guess, Hillary people smoke pot too. What can I say?
So how were the ratios chosen from Bernie supporters and Trump and Hillary supporters?
I don't know the answer to that. I imagine that it had to do with the probably a combination of the popular vote that had been received and the number of delegates that had been apportioned to each of the candidates. You may be the expert on this rather than me. I don't know.
So how were you chosen by the Bernie Sanders camp?
I believe it was mostly through my union. I've been involved in, and I should say my union, of which I'm an extremely proud member, the Communications Workers of America, CWA. And CWA was one of the large national unions that officially endorsed Bernie. And they made that endorsement after doing an every member vote, which was a highly unusual it was a highly unusual process, and one that is clearly to be applauded, rather than merely top union leadership brass saying, we're going to endorse such and so. Our union did an every member vote. So I had license from my union, and my union had enabled me to get more involved and to spearhead some of the coordinating efforts. So I'm pretty sure that my name was put forward by either my district or my national union.
So for the platform that was just adopted, of course it's been called the most progressive platform in the history of the Democratic Party. What issues were you happy to see added, and which issues would you have liked to see added?
Let me start with the issues that I would like to have seen added, and there's a few of them. One, I think that the existing language about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which barely mentions the Trans-Pacific Partnership per se, talks about the necessity for the U.S. only to be involved in, good trade deals that promote jobs and consumers and the environment and environmental protections, worker protections, and yet it's very vague. It does not say, and that's why we oppose the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I think that is a serious lapse. I very much wish that the platform committee would have been willing to take on. I understand that it's something that Barack Obama really supports, and I think that was a lot of the reason why they did not want to oppose it. Still, I think it's a big mistake. It's a terrible deal. Environmental standards, consumer protections, pharmaceutical prices are going to soar. Corporations will be able to sue the United States if they think that our, say, labor laws or environmental protections interfere with their ability to make a profit. It's like, what is with that? That is just whack city. So the TPP, I'm sorry there's not strong language about that. I'm sorry that there's not stronger language supporting a single-payer health plan. And the fact that there's no ban on fracking. You folks here from Pennsylvania ought to know about the importance of truly banning and fracking. Instead, there's some sort of mealy-mouthed language in there. As you could tell, I don't hold back on my opinion. That says that where communities oppose fracking, it will not be imposed on them. Well, no, I don't care if the community opposes it or not. I mean, communities, for example, didn't oppose segregation and didn't oppose, women's, the fact that women weren't allowed to vote. You don't always go by popular opinion, you go by what's right. So I think banning fracking, I wish that was in there. What is in there, I believe it is free public higher education. That's fantastic. There is talk about the need that there is an environmental crisis, and that we need to focus on green energy and on ways of making, preserving and rebuilding the environment. That's really important. I think also talking about doing shifting of tax burdens when we need to have, the fact that, and you know this or your parents know this anyways, as well as anybody, when, I pay more in taxes than entire corporations pay, and I don't make much money. That's just clearly wrong. So I think that there is a recognition that the middle class needs to be saved and rehabilitated and nourished, and we need to bring more people into it. There's also good language about people's ability to freely vote for and engage in labor unions. That's the background I come out of, and there are many corporations. In fact, ironically, I think AT&T is like one of the sponsors of the DNC. They're a very large employer that continues trying to cost shift medical insurance for their employees and reduce retirement income for employees. So there is a certain irony there.
Do you think that any of those issues that you were happy to see added can be attributed directly to the Sanders camp?
I think the focus on green energy, absolutely, and on free public higher education. Those would not be there were it not for what the Sanders campaign has been advocating. And those are, there are other, I'm not yet the expert on the massive platform because, again, it was rather huge. But there are many very good progressive aspects to it. Even the fact that we're focusing on probably almost every campaign since forever ago has focused on the need to rebuild the middle class. But this is talking about ways to actually do it in terms of shifting taxes, in making more of lifting the cap on the amount of income that is that pays into Social Security in order to bolster Social Security income. I mean, these are real concrete ideas that are going to be good for the middle class, or as I like to call it, the working class.
Now, do you think that Donald Trump is comparable to Bernie Sanders? And do you think that Bernie supporters who are fed up with Hillary are justified in voting for Trump instead?
No to both. I think the only similarity between Trump and Bernie is that they're bipeds. And that's pretty much it. I think that I find it very hard to believe that Bernie supporters would be Trump supporters just sort of out of spite, and looking at Trump as another outsider equivalent to Bernie. I just think that that's really ignorant and naive, and I cannot believe that somebody who believes in the issues that Bernie has been supporting would then say, okay, well, if it can't be Bernie, then I guess I'll vote for Trump. That just makes no sense to me.
So let's talk about the DNC for a minute. Do you think that the DNC has been fair to Bernie Sanders? I mean, there were just emails released that show they were trying to use his religion against him. Do you think that the Democrats have treated him in a way that you would still vote for Hillary because Hillary won the nomination fairly?
Well, okay. Again, there's a number of different questions in there. Do I think the DNC has treated the two campaigns fairly? The answer is no, and I think that the emails just confirm that. We've talked, within the Bernie campaign, we've talked for months about the disparity in terms of media coverage. And, Bernie can have, rallies that draw 20, 40, 60,000 people, and there will literally be no mention of it in the news. I think that the fact that there were people in the DNC who were considering using Bernie's religion against him, that just sort of strikes at everything the Democratic Party is supposed to stand for, which is the party of inclusion. And I'm sort of ashamed that there are people in great positions of power within the DNC that would think that probably among other areas would be fair game. So I'm very sorry to learn that, but I'm certainly not shocked that they would consider ways to undermine Bernie Sanders' campaign.
Do you think that it's mostly been the media and the DNC doing this unfair action, or has the Hillary campaign also have blame?
I don't know. I would be surprised if the DNC did much that Hillary's campaign was not at least aware of. Whether they orchestrated things or not, I don't know.
What are your thoughts on third-party candidates? For example, Jill Stein, who shares similar views to Bernie Sanders.
Excellent question. I do think that Jill Stein has a lot of really excellent stances. I agree with her on a number of things. Unfortunately, we are in a situation in the United States where there can be excellent third-party candidates who are completely unviable. And given that state of a political reality, that's why I find myself in the position of acknowledging that I'm definitely going to be voting for Hillary, because we don't have proportional voting in the United States. And, I actually toyed with the idea of either not voting or voting for a third party candidate, because there's part of me that thought maybe then if that causes Donald Trump to be elected by not having a larger base for Hillary, maybe that's what the United States needs, so that it would either shake up the Democratic Party or create the conditions where a third party could rise and be a viable party. I am probably I'm a wimp. I'm not willing to take that chance of, people would say, well, we could make sure, we could try and make sure that it's just a one term for Donald Trump. But I'm like, really? Are we really talking about risking so much, to this thing, to be elected president? I'm too frightened of that prospect.
Now, if Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are the two nominees, and you're supporting Hillary,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that Jill Stein and Gary Johnson should be of any concern to those two campaigns?
I would think that Jill Stein could be a concern. I find libertarians such a curious bunch that I'm not quite sure why people choose to vote libertarian, but I understand the appeal that Jill Stein, as we've discussed, who shares many of the opinions that Bernie does. I could see how people who had been and have been and still are Bernie supporters could end up voting for Jill Stein. And I think that is a concern or it should be a concern for the Hillary campaign. I think Hillary needs to do all that she can, and I think that the DNC is at least an opportunity for that, to woo Bernie candidates. And I have to say that her selection of Tim Kaine doesn't make me think that she's really trying to woo Bernie delegates.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Tim Kaine?
I don't know him very well. Things that stick in my mind are, that he's anti-choice, and that he has been in favor of right to work, or as we rightfully call it, right to work for less. And those concern me. I wish that she had, and I'm sure that there are, millions of top-level discussions that I can't even pretend to know what goes on at that level, but considerations of gender, considerations of race. I would have liked to have seen something that was looked a little bit more like the Democratic Party does look. And I certainly would not want, and he's totally supported NAFTA and TPP. I mean, he's, a conservative, social democrat. So that does concern me. I just hope that, like most vice presidents, he won't have much influence.
What are your thoughts on Mike Pence, Donald Trump's running mate?
Once again, I had the good fortune of being able to say I had never heard of this guy before. And everything that I hear about him now just scares me. So he is very much of a social and, I believe, foreign policy conservative. He didn't do anything to broaden Donald Trump's appeal. I think he's speaking to the more entrenched within that party. So,
who do you think is going to win in November?
Well, I should probably renew my subscription to the Psychic Friends Network. In my heart of hearts, I believe that Hillary will win. But I'm certainly not counting on anything, and the fact that this has been such an incredibly bizarre, campaign year. I never thought that I thought Donald Trump was like the biggest joke, and I should say I still do, except that he has become a disturbingly frightening joke. He's like a Stephen King kind of a joke. And I would never have thought that he would have gotten anywhere near this far. And the fact that he is the Republican nominee, a year ago, I would have laughed you out of the room. And now, that's why I sort of think anything's up for grabs. But I can't believe that there are that many small-minded, hateful, short-sighted, ignorant people in the United States that would allow Donald Trump to become president.
So now that the platform has been adopted, what's left to happen for the DNC July 25th to 28th? What are we actually going to get accomplished?
I think that, well, first of all, I think that very few people know much of what is in the platform. So I think that the speeches and the caucuses are going to be educating people about what is in the platform. And there are various constituency groups here that are going to do what they can to educate people about what is and what isn't in there, things that we need to do. The platform sets a direction. It's not a requirement. I don't think that anybody has looked at somebody's presidency, and maybe they have. Here's a good project for you. You take somebody's presidency and then you compare it to what was the platform that was their quote-unquote mandate going into their presidency. See, what did they actually do? Did they stick with it? Did they go counter to it? Did they modify it? Did they take it as the gospel? Was it their marching orders? I actually think that's an interesting question. At the platform committee meeting in Orlando, we were informed on multiple occasions that the platform was an aspirational document. It was something to which the party should aspire, and it was sort of setting the large direction for the party. So I hope that this week in Philadelphia, what we're going to get to see is aspects of that platform rolled out, and that we talk about why the platform planks are important, sort of where we have come from and where this will hopefully lead us to. So that's what I look at.
Now, this video will hopefully be viewed by high school students.
Great.
Do you have any closing remarks, especially for them?
I have listened to enough graduation speeches, and again, remember, I worked at the University of California at Berkeley for 32 years, and I come out of the University of California system, and our entire family does. So I've listened to a lot of graduation speeches over the years, and one of the things that they almost always do, at which point you just yawn and turn away, is you say, "The youth are the future of America." Duh. Us old dinosaurs, we're not going to be around forever. And what I would hope that high school students do is take your responsibilities seriously and don't wait for a time when you think you're going to be ready to take things on. Start taking things on immediately. Somebody once gave me some really good advice in a political situation. They said two things. One, aim high, and two, don't ask for permission. Just, leap in and do what you think is right. So that's what my advice is for high school and other young people looking at this. Definitely don't ask for permission. Just do it.